Greetings, class. Steve Cold here, and I wanted just to spend a few moments with you, talk about your final exam for my portion of your paramedic course. And just a couple of things. So first off, the general structure, I think I have it down there. It will be a 100-point, 50-question exam. 100 points, 50 questions. I originally thought about 100 questions, 1 point each, but I thought 50 questions was a little bit more reasonable. But some of these questions, just so you know, will be most of them are multiple choice. There might be even one or two true and false, multiple guess. But there are quite a few that are matching with multiple segments. So I thought 50 questions was probably a little bit more appropriate. You will have your full 3 hours from 1300 to 1600 to take this, unless there's been special arrangements made with Rod. I think that may apply to one or two of you. In addition, I don't think you'll need the full 3 hours to take this, but you have the full 3 hours. So permissible aids, just like the previous one, you'll be able to bring two standard pages, 8.5 by 11, of handwritten, typed, crayoned, braille, whatever you want to do on those two pages, back and front, whatever works. You will not be able to use your cell phones. You will not be able to consult with each other. It's open notes, not open neighbor. So, which is pretty much exactly what we did for your midterm, more or less. Unlike your midterm, this one will be 100% online, and it will be proctored through Procterio. I've never personally used Procterio. Rod is setting it up, but I've used other programs similar. So in essence, you'll log in, and you'll log in probably through a computer that has a webcam and audio set up. And what will happen is I would expect them to make you look around with the camera, show your notes, show you don't have any notes plastered on the wall anywhere underneath your keyboard, in your trash can, stuff like that. And these programs are surprisingly sophisticated. So they look at where your eyes are looking. They actually analyze with a fairly high fidelity the sounds. So they can hear rustling of papers, etc., so forth. So if you haven't been through one of these, just be aware that that's what it is. And what will happen is if they suspect unusual behavior, they'll flag it, and we'll have to deal with it then. So I don't think you'll need it, especially considering you're going to have 2 pages of notes. I've seen how tiny some of y'all can print stuff. A good portion of the questions came from the original midterm, and then of course over half of them, well over half of them are over the new material. So it's roughly split. Maybe not roughly, but yeah, about roughly split. So if there's any questions about that, feel free to email me or post in the final Q&A session. That's set up like a discussion board on this module. I'm going to briefly just go down. I'm not going to show you this because I don't want you to actually see the questions. But I am going to take a look here. Oops, let me do this here. And I'm going to hit some of the high points, just so that, fair warning what's in there. So I think I have at least one question from every module. Obviously, some will have more than others. So let me go back here. Bear with me for a minute. Nope, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Just give me what I want. This does not give me what I want. Give me just a second here. There you go. Okay. So let's see. You'll see a lot of the same questions. I have some questions about ventilator cycle mode. The modes of ventilators. So you should be familiar with ACV, SIMV, and assist control. control mandatory ventilation, assist control ventilation, and SIMV, being able to tell the difference with those, and pressure support. You should be able to know the magic number for converting glucose, millimoles, to milligrams per deciliter, and vice versa. You should be able to know your blood gases. There are, of course, a few questions on blood products in here. A couple questions on the types of vascular access. So whether it's a PICC line, midline, central line, tunneled, central line, non-tunneled, that type of thing. The dopes mnemonic. I've got a few questions on like mean arterial pressure, shock index, stuff of that nature. You should know what the, if your end-tidal CO2 raises or lowers, what the effect of that in numerical value is in your pH. Let's see. Know how to access a portacath. Know your blood values, so your hematocrit, your hemoglobin, your H&H, as we used to talk about. I talked about your vent settings, so you should know your tidal volumes, your minute volumes, your I/E ratios. This one right here. I already talked about you should know your shock index, your modified shock index, your cardiac output, mean arterial output, mean arterial pressure, your formulas for those. We talked about ventilator modes. Look at this one here. You should know, if you remember when we talked about the different types of life-sustaining equipment, so your in-aortic balloon pumps, your total artificial hearts, your ventricular assist devices, you should be able to look at a description of those and match them or pair them up or tell the difference between them, stuff like that. So like I said, you need to know your blood gases. There are a couple of at least one or two end-tidal CO2 questions on here. So we talked about blood products. You should be able to know what your different blood products are, so albumin, fresh frozen plasma, so on and so forth. You should know what damage control resuscitation is. You may remember that question from the essay portion. You should also know what your 1-to-1-to-1 massive transfusion protocol is. You should also know what your London protocol for RSI and the shock and trauma, or correction, the shocky, the hypotensive patient. Moving into some of the newer stuff, treatment for esophageal varices. Some specific equipment that's used for that you should be able to identify. Let's see, so I had a quote in here about pandemic response, and not quote, a section on what type of resources will be available to the nation, to the community, in terms of healthcare providers and so on and so forth during a pandemic and some of the impacts. I specifically have questions about mortality rate and case fatality rate and R naught from pandemics. When we talk about autonomic dysreflexia, I have some pathophysiology questions on that, including a couple fill in the blanks, AD, blah, blah, blank, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and those are also in your study guide, so you should be able to fill those out. I have both non-pharmacological methods for treating AD and pharmacological methods. So you should have a rough idea what some of the appropriate pharmacological methods for treating autonomic dysreflexia are. In the same module, we talked about Guillain-Barré syndrome, so I have a couple of statements about Guillain-Barré you'll have to fill in the blank that have to do with their presentation. Is in regards to both global and localized neurological presentations. I have some questions about Todd's paralysis. I have some questions about vagus nerve stimulators. I have questions about thyrotoxicosis. And that one's a pretty decent one, so it's more of a matching or select all. And let's take a look at this one. And I have some questions from our mental health lecture. Okay, and I want to specifically mention this because from our mental health lecture, we spent a lot of time talking about community paramedics, but I also had a separate lecture on restraints. And if you didn't, that wasn't emphasized much in discussion boards. So if you haven't watched that lecture on restraints, watch it because there is a fairly robust couple questions matching regarding the implications, the legality of restraints, what we can and can't do, and they're all quotes that you have to complete from key parts of that lecture. So I would be familiar with them so you can match them to the right match, I guess. Let's see here. So what was this? In the final few modules, we talked about adrenal insufficiency. So I had the common causes for adrenal insufficiency in developed world and in the undeveloped world, as well as underserved populations such as the homeless and such. So I have a question or two about that. I also have one or two questions on dialysis, types of dialysis. Okay. And that is, let's look here. Did I miss any I wanted to briefly mention? Oh, that's another entitled CO2 question. So that's just some of the stuff you can expect. None of it should be a surprise. A good portion of it should overlap with the other classes, but still take some time to research and both listen to what I did and what I just talked about, as well as look at your study guide that I gave you. So obviously, not everything on the study guide is in the test. I didn't want to just give the test to you, but I wanted you to have the high points of each module to look at. But I have again gone over some of the key high points of the test. So between those two, you should do quite well. Now, finally, I just want to wrap up a couple things. So grading for this course is still 300 points total. So you need to have an 80% to pass the course. So 300 times 0.8 equals 240 points. So you need to clear this course with 240 points to move on. So with that in mind, take a look at your grades. If you notice there's stuff I've missed, some stuff I said, hey, you put me down for this, for the extra credit for the trait course or whatever. I think I've gotten everybody, the discussion boards, the extra credit for the feedback. Please, by all means, reach out to me. Especially that extra credit, it's manual grading. So sometimes stuff gets misclicked, or Moodle's been kind of weird past few months or past few weeks. So anyway, I wish you all the best of luck. I hope you kick this test right in the tail. And there's really no reason why anybody should do poorly on it. All the answers, all the questions, all the solutions are right there in front of you. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you out there.